Ready Rose with Lime, the Vin Library, and today we have a spreadsheet, and then we have Wuthering Heights. You know, the things you look forward to most on this channel. Spreadsheets. Yeah! Hello everyone! Hello Noble Size Phantom, hello Scarlet Silver Iron, hello Xnam, hello Rahel, hello Maxwell! Hello, hello, hello. You got caught in a snowstorm on Friday, Noble Size Phantom? I'm glad you made it home okay. Yeah, and no one died. You didn't kill anyone. No one killed you. That's wonderful. Be very careful. This weather is very scary. I actually told my job at one time this week that I was not going outside. It's very scary. Gotta be careful. Have you ever watched Courage the Cowardly Dog? Yes! And it freaked me out as a kid. I both was fascinated and terrified of it because it's like that Ren and Stimpy sort of creepy art style-y. I don't like it. I don't like it. I know I joke about being the last of the V8 interceptors not driving, but I swear it's everyone else who drives like maniacs. And I'm the grandpa driving. The bit 1 year! Oh, Whitey! You're British now? I don't have the power to call you British. But you could be honorary British for a while if you want. Hello, Native Gamer! Hello, Candy Gamer! Welcome, welcome, welcome. Magic heads. 1 year gang! Ah! Another one for the 1 year gang! So many in the 1 year gang. Look at you all. You're all old. Let's see if I can move that. Can I move that so you... Well, no, I don't think so. Even if I, like, change where it is, it's not gonna show the whole thing. 1 year gang! You've all been funding me for a year! And I really appreciate that. I really do. Thank you so much, guys. I love you. Thank you. 10 out of 10. Good fans. Not the people who can't afford on, but I don't know. You know what I mean. Words. Anyway, should we get this spreadsheet out of the way? So, why is this spreadsheet here? Because I fell down the webtoons again. I ended up down the webtoons again. Specifically, I fell down the webtoons and read more Batman Wayne Family Adventures. Almost solely because of that Sonic fanfic I found where Shadow gets adopted by older Damien and older John, who then they are engaged. It's great. My job did a very silly thing where they said they would get us out early before the snow got really bad, then kept us an hour past. Yeah, fair! Definitely fair. Don't go in. They should not be treating you like that. They should treat you better. So this would be chapters 60 to 80. I'm trying to put notes on what chapters they are so that I can keep track of things a little better. And this will be chapters 80 to 100 that I read. There we go. And it was a webtoon. And who's it by? These guys. Boop, boop. Copy, paste. It is a series, and I did read it this year. Series 2025. And that would make it 188 and 189. Don't accidentally mute myself by pressing the 9 button. I didn't! Yay! Success! So that makes my total now. That's the wrong one. This one. Da-da-da! 9,811 books to go! We're getting there. If I added my fanfic, we'd probably already be there. We're not adding the fanfiction I read. I don't want to do that. That's private. You don't ask a girl their age. You don't ask a man their finance. And you don't ask a fangirl their fanfiction. Right, Wuthering Heights. It be wuthering. It'd be so very withered. What's going on? We have 25% of this book left. Just wait, you'll be all done reading all the books needed for freedom and still be getting through an... No! Have you seen Maxwell and Hermit? Not Hermit, is it? Brain. Yeah, Hermit, I was right. I didn't believe in myself that I had the name right. Anyway, have you seen them discussing shit? If I don't get through with the packs they've just made me, then I need to just quit humanity, I think. If I don't, we're gonna have to mod it, basically. I have confidence in the Bill Tuesday. I've been somewhat following the conversations, and your notes seem to be good, so I'm excited to try it out. I think the change will help. We should get there. Tuesday, finish Ruiner. Tuesday, finish Ruiner. But that's Tuesday's problem. Today's problem is wuthering. We wuther. This build has managed to beat the ensemble by only pressing P and using trigrams without any ego pages used. Oh. Should I press P the whole time? We'll do it. We'll do it. We'll think about it. Think about it on Tuesday. How do I even say what's happening in Wuthering Heights? I could give a little summary of what's happening. Which comes first? Ruiner or Karen Costner's Horizon Part 2? Of what's sort of happening in this little section. So in this little section, Heathcliff's small child is dying. And he doesn't care. He wants his small child to marry small Kathy, because that way he can get all the estate when his child dies. In order to do that, he's emotionally manipulating small Kathy into coming around to his house all the time and seeing him, so that eventually she will pity marry him and things will work out. Unfortunately, we do kind of know this works out because we had the flash forward at the start where, you know, she was Mrs. Heathcliff. So we know this girl is doomed. Absolutely doomed. Oh wait, I forgot something. I realized my setup isn't right. 1 second. This is probably going to make my model go weird. Oh, not that bad, actually. There we go. That should help the trackie. Put my blanket back on my legs, cause it's cold. Oh, it's not that cold. It's not that bad, actually. It's still snow outside. It snowed like, Wednesday, I think was the last time it snowed, but there's still snow outside. It's not all melted away yet, and it needs to go away. I don't want it. I have to go outside in it. It's awful. Blech. Anyway. That's probably the best and tiniest summary I can give you of the chaos that has been Wuthering Heights. Let's continue reading, shall we? Chapter 27. 7 days glided away, every one marking its course by the henceforth rapid alteration of Edgar Linton's state. The havoc that months had previously wrought was now emulated by the inroads of hours. Catherine we would fain have deluded yet, but her own quick spirit refused to delude her. It divined in secret, and brooded on the dreadful probability, gradually ripening into certainty. She had not the heart to mention her ride. When Thursday came round, I mentioned it for her, and obtained permission to order her out of doors, for the library where her father stopped a short time daily, the brief period he could bear to sit up. And his chamber had become her whole world. The grudged each moment that did not find her bending over his pillow, or seated by his side. Her countenance grew wan with watching and sorrow, and my master gladly dismissed her to what he flattered himself would be a happy change of scene and society, drawing comfort from the hope that she would not be left entirely alone after his death. It's snow is mostly gone here, though there's still enough to shut most of the estate infrastructure down. Yay! He had a fixed idea, I guessed, by several observations. He let fall that, as his nephew resembled him in person, he would resemble him in mind, for Linton's letters bore few or no indications of his defective character, and I, though pardonable weakness, refrained from correcting the error, asking myself what good there would be in disrupting his last moments with information that he had neither power nor opportunity to turn to account. We deferred our excursion till the afternoon, a golden afternoon of August, every breath from the hills so full of life that it seemed whoever respired it, though dying, might revive. Catherine's face was just like the landscape, shadows and sunshine flittering over it in rapid succession. But the shadows rested longer, and the sunshine was more transient, and her poor little heart reproached itself for even that passing forgetfulness of its cares. We discerned Linton watching at the same spot he had selected before. My young mistress alighted and told me that, as she was resolved to stay a very little while, I had better hold the pony and remain on horseback. But I dissented. I wouldn't risk losing sight of the charge committed to me a minute. So we climbed the slope of Heath together. Master Heathcliff received us with greater animation on this occasion. Not the animation of high spirits, though, nor yet of joy. It looked more like fear. Oh, this poor boy. This boy is literally dying, and Dad's like, you better fucking get a girlfriend before you die. Ugh. It is late, he said, speaking short, and with difficulty. Is not your father very ill? I thought you wouldn't come. Why would you be more candid? Cried Catherine, swallowing her greeting. Why cannot you say at once you don't want me? It is strange, Linton, that for the second time you have brought me here on purpose, apparently to distress us both, and for no reason besides. Linton shivered and glanced at her, half supplicating, half ashamed. But his cousin's patience was not sufficient to endure this enigmatical behaviour. My father is very ill, she said, and why I am called from his bedside. Why didn't you send to absolve me of my promise when you wished I wouldn't keep it? Come, I desire an explanation. Pain and trifling are completely banished out of my mind, and I can't dance attendance on your affections now. My affections, he murmured. What are they, for heaven's sake? Catherine, don't look so angry. But despise me as much as you please. I am a worthless, cowardly wretch. I can't be scorned enough, but I'm too mean for your anger. Hate my father and spare me for contempt. Nonsense! Cried Catherine in a passion. Foolish, silly boy! And there he trembles, as if I were really going to touch him. You needn't bespeak contempt, Linton. Anybody will have it spontaneously at your service. Get off! I shall return home. It is folly dragging you from the hearthstone and pretending. What do we pretend? Let go my frock. If I pitied you for crying and looking so very frightened, you should spurn such pity. Ellen, tell him how disgraceful his conduct is. Rise, and don't regard yourself into an abject reptile. Don't! With streaming face and an expression of agony, Linton had thrown his nerveless frame along the ground. He seemed convulsed with exquisite terror. Oh, he sobbed. I cannot bear it. Catherine, Catherine, I'm a traitor too, and I dare not tell you. Believe me, and I shall be killed. Dear Catherine, my life is in your hands, and you have said you loved me. And if you did, it wouldn't harm you. You'll not go, then, kind, sweet, good Catherine, and perhaps you will consent, and he'll let me die with you. My young lady, on witnessing his intense anguish, stooped to raise him. The old feeling of indulgent tenderness came over her vexation, and she grew thoroughly moved and alarmed. Consent to what? She asked. To stay? Tell me the meaning of this strange talk, and I will. You contradict your own words, and distract me. Be calm and frank, and confess at once all that weighs on your heart. You wouldn't injure me, Linton, would you? You wouldn't let any enemy hurt me, if you could prevent it? I'll believe you are a coward, for yourself, but not a cowardly betrayer of your best friend. But my father is threatening me, gasped the boy, clasping his attenuated fingers. And I dread him, I dare not tell. Oh well, said Catherine with a scornful compassion. Keep your secret. I'm no coward. Save yourself, I'm not afraid. Her magnanimity provoked his tears. He wept wildly, kissing her supporting hands, and yet could not summon courage to speak out. I was cogitating what the mystery might be, and determined Catherine should never suffer to benefit him or anyone else by my goodwill, when, hearing a rustle among the ling, I looked up and saw Mr. Heathcliff, almost close upon us, descending the heights. He didn't cast a glance towards my companions, though they were sufficiently near for Linton's sobs to be audible, but hailing me in the almost hearty tone he assumed to none besides, and the sincerity of which I couldn't avoid doubting, he said, It is something to see you so near my house, Nelly. How are you at the Grange? Let us hear. The rumour goes, he added in a low tone, that Edgar Linton is on his deathbed. Perhaps they exaggerate his illness? No. No, my master is dying, I replied. It is true enough. A sad thing it will be for us all, but a blessing for him. How long will he last, do you think? He asked. I don't know, I said. Because, he continued, looking at the two young people who were fixed under his eye. Linton appeared as if he could not venture to stir or raise his head, and Catherine could not move on his account. Because that lad yonder seems determined to beat me, and I'll thank his uncle to be quick and go before him. Hallo, has the whelp been playing that game long? I did give him some lessons about snivelling. Is he pretty lively with Miss Linton generally? Lively? No. He has shown the greatest distress, I answered. To see him, I should say that instead of rambling with his sweetheart on the hills, he ought to be in bed under the hands of a doctor. Yeah, worrying about his neighbour. Yeah, totally worried about his neighbour. Really worried about his neighbour. He shall be in a day or two, muttered Heathcliff. But first, get up, Linton, get up, he shouted. Don't grovel on the ground there. Up, this moment. Linton had sunk prostrate again in another paroxysm of helplessness, fear, caused by his father's glance towards him, I suppose. There was nothing else to produce such humiliation. He made several efforts to obey, but his little strength was annihilated for the time, and he fell back again with a moan. Mr. Heathcliff advanced and lifted him to lean against a rigid tuff. Now, he said, with fervid ferocity, I'm getting angry, and if you don't command that paltry spirit of yours, damn you, get up directly. I will, father, he panted, only let me alone, or I shall faint. I've done as you wished, I'm sure. Catherine will tell you that I have been cheerful. Keep by me, Catherine. Give me your hand. Take mine, said his father. Stand on your feet. There now. She'll lend you her arm. That's right, look at her. You would imagine I was the devil himself, Miss Linton, to excite such horror. Be so kind as to walk home with him, will you? He shudders if I touch him. Linton, dear, whispered Catherine, I can't go to Wuthering Heights. Papa has forbidden me. He'll not harm you. Why are you so afraid? I can never re-enter that house, he answered. I'm not to re-enter it without you. Stop, cried his father. We'll respect Catherine's filial scruples. Nellie, take him in, and I'll follow your advice concerning the doctor without delay. Everything shudders. The world shudders at Heathcliff's touch. You'll do well, replied I, but I must remain with my mistress. To mind your son is not my business. Nellie says... You are very stiff, said Heathcliff. I know that, but you'll force me to pinch the baby and make it scream before it moves. Your charity. Come on then, my hero. Are you willing to return, escorted by me? He approached once more, and made as if he would seize the fragile being, but shrinking back, Linton clung to his cousin, and implored her to accompany him, with a frantic importunity that admitted no denial. However, I disapproved. I couldn't hinder her, indeed. How could she have refused him herself? What was filling him with dread we had no means of discerning. He had no means of discerning, except for the fact it's incredibly obvious. But there he was, powerless under its grip even, and any addition seemed capable of shocking him into idiocy. We reached the threshold. Catherine walked in, and I stood waiting till she had conducted an invalid to a chair, expecting her out immediately, when Mr. Heathcliff, pushing me forward, exclaimed, My house is not stricken with the plague, Nellie, and I have a mind to be hospitable today. Sit down, and allow me to shut the door. Heathcliff, no! What could possibly be causing him distress? Could it be the massive tower of hate and spite standing right over there? No, most definitely not. Don't be silly. It's probably gout, yeah. Just been sat around too long. He shut and locked it also. I stared. You shall have tea before you go home. He added, Hello, CS, welcome. I am by myself. Hareton is gone with some cattle to the Lees, and Zillah and Joseph are off on a journey of pleasure. And though I'm used to being alone, I'd rather have some interesting company if I can get it. Miss Linton, take your seat by him. I'll give you what I have. The present is hardly worth accepting, but I have nothing else to offer. Yeah, Joseph's gone! We can't deal with Joseph. If I can get it. Miss Linton... It is Linton, I mean. How she does stare. It's odd what a savage feeling I have to anything that seems afraid of me. I have been born where laws are less strict and tastes less dainty. I should treat myself to a slow vivisection of those two. It's an evening's amusement. Heathcliff, no! Down, Heathcliff! Bad, Heathcliff! Heathcliff makes tea. This would taste less bitter if you actually did it. Oh. He drew in his breath, struck the table, and swore to himself, By hell, I hate them. I am not afraid of you, exclaimed Catherine, who could not hear the latter part of his speech. She stepped close up, her black eyes flashing with passion and resolution. Give me that key. I will have it, she said. I wouldn't eat or drink here if I was starving. Oh, you poor girl. Heathcliff had the key in his hand that remained on the table. He looked up, seized with a sort of surprise at her boldness, or possibly reminded by her voice and glance of the person from whom she inherited it. She snatched the instrument and half succeeded in getting it out of his loosened fingers, but her action recalled him to the present. He recovered it speedily. Now, Catherine Linton, he said, stand off or I shall knock you down, and that will make Mrs. Dean mad. Regardless of his warning, she captured his close hand and its contents. We will go, she repeated, exerting her utmost efforts to cause the iron muscles to relax, and finding that her nails made no impression, she applied her teeth pretty sharply. God damn, Catherine! She will not take no for an answer. She applied her teeth pretty sharply. Heathcliff glanced at me. A glance that kept me from interfering a moment. Catherine was too intent on his fingers to notice his face. He opened them suddenly and resigned the object of dispute, but ere she had well secured it, he seized her with a liberated hand and, pulling her on his knee, administered with the other a shower of terrific slaps on both sides of the head, each sufficient to have fulfilled his threat had she been able to fall. At his diabolical violence, I rushed on him furious. You villain! I began to cry. You villain! A touch on the chest silenced me. I am stout and soon put out of breath, and with that, in a rage, I staggered dizzily back, and felt ready to suffocate or to burst a blood vessel. The scene was over in 2 minutes. Catherine released, put her 2 hands to her temples, and looked just as if she were not sure whether her ears were off or on. She trembled like a reed, poor thing, and leant against the table, perfectly bewildered. I know how to chastise children, you see, said the scoundrel grimly as he stooped to repose himself of the key, which had dropped to the floor. Go to Linton now, as I told you, and cry at your ease. I shall be your father tomorrow, or the father you'll have in a few days, and you shall have plenty of that. You can bear plenty. You're no weakling. You shall have a daily taste, if I catch such a devil of a temper in your eyes again. Cathy ran to me instead of Linton, and knelt down and put her burning cheek on my lap, weeping aloud. Her cousin had shrunk into a corner of the settle, as quiet as a mouse, congratulating himself, I dare say, that the correction had alighted on another than him. Mr. Heathcliff, perceiving us all confounded, rose and expeditiously made the tea himself. The cups and saucers were laid ready. He poured it out and handed me a cup. Wash away your spleen, he said, and help your own naughty pet and mine. It is not poisoned, though I prepared it. I'm going out to seek your horses. Takes after her mum. I wish she took after her mum just that tiny bit more. If she just kept that fire, I don't know. Then Heathcliff probably would have killed her, let's face it. I don't know what would be better in this situation. Our first thought on his departure was to force an exit somewhere. We tried the kitchen door, but that was fastened outside. We looked at the windows. They were too narrow for even Cathy's little figure. Master Linton, I cried, seeing we were regularly imprisoned, you know what your diabolical father is after, and you shall tell us, or I'll box your ears, as he has done to your cousins. Yes, Linton, you must tell, said Catherine. It was for your sake I came, and it will be wickedly ungrateful if you refuse. Give me some tea. I'm thirsty, and then I'll tell you, he answered. Mrs. Dean, go away. I don't like you standing over me. Now, Catherine, you are letting your tears fall into my cup. I won't drink that. Give me another. Jesus Christ, you little shit! Of course she's freaking crying. Catherine pushed another to him and wiped her face. I felt disgusted at the wretch's composure, since he was no longer in terror for himself. The anguish he had exhibited on the moor subsided as soon as he entered Wuthering Heights. So I guessed he had been menaced with an awful visitation of wrath if he failed in decoying us there. And, that accomplished, he had no further immediate fears. Brilliant language. This is absolute bollocks. This whole thing is bollocks. Well written, incredibly interesting, dramatic bollocks. Papa wants us to be married, he continued after sipping some of the liquid, and he knows your papa wouldn't let us marry now, and he's afraid of my dying if we wait. So we are to be married in the morning, and you are to stay here all night, and if you do as he wishes, you shall return home next day and take me with you. Take you with her, pitiful changeling, I exclaimed. You marry? Why, the man is mad, or he thinks us fools, every one. And do you imagine that beautiful young lady, that healthy, hearty girl, will tie herself to a little perishing monkey like you? God damn! Are you cherishing the notion that anybody, let alone Miss Catherine Linton, would have you for a husband? You want whipping for bringing us in here at all, with your dastardly pulling tricks. And don't look so silly now. I've a very good mind to shake you severely for your contemptible treachery and your imbecilic conceit. She's on fire! I did give him a slight shaking, but it brought on a cough, and he took his too ordinary resource of moaning and weeping, and Catherine beat No, Nelly! Keep shaking, the little shit. Bring on a premature... Okay, and this is going to sound really, really bad, but if Linton dies now, then Heathcliff fails. So what if Ellen just shook him to death? I'm sure it'll be fine. Might as well roast this book. Neighborhood barbecue. She's roasting them. Stay all night? No! She said, looking down slowly. Ellen, I'll burn that door down, but I'll get out. And she would have commenced the execution of her threat directly, but Linton was up in alarm for his dear self again. He clasped her in his two feeble arms, sobbing, Won't you have me and save me? Not let me come to the Grange. Oh, darling Catherine, you mustn't go and leave after all. You must obey my father, you must. I must obey my own, she replied, and relieve him of this cruel suspense. The whole night? What would he think? He'll be distressed already. I'll either break or burn a way out of the house. Be quiet. You're in no danger. But if you hinder me, Linton, I love Papa better than you. Okay, that's quite scary. You're not in danger unless you get in my way, Linton. The mortal terror he felt and Mr. Heathcliff's anger was restored to the boy. His coward's eloquence. Catherine was near distraught still. She persisted that she must go home, and tried entreaty in her turn, persuading him to subdue his selfish agony. While they were thus occupied, our jailer re-entered. Your beasts have trotted off, he said. And now Linton's snivelling again. What has she been doing to you? Come, have done, and get to bed. In a month or two, my lad, you'll be able to pay her back her present tyrannies with a vigorous hand. You're pining for pure love, are you not? Nothing else in the world, and she shall have you. There, to bed. Zillah won't be here tonight. You must undress yourself. Hush, hold your noise. Once in your own room, I'll not come near you. You needn't fear. By chance, you've managed tolerably. I'll look to the rest. Even if Linton dies now, there's nothing stopping Heathcliff from puppeteering his corpse around and forcing him to... there isn't. They could weekend at Bernie's it. No, that's awful, and I hate that you're right. And that's awful, and I hate that you're right. He spoke these words, holding the door open for his son to pass, and the latter achieved his exit exactly as a spaniel might which suspected the person who attacked it on it of designing a spiteful squeeze. The lock was resecured. Heathcliff approached the fire, where my mistress and I stood silent. Catherine looked up and instinctively raised her hand to her cheek. His neighbourhood received a painful sensation. Anybody else would have been incapable of regarding the childish act with sternness, but he scowled on her and muttered, "Oh, you are not afraid of me. Your courage is well disguised. You seem damnably afraid." "I am afraid now," she replied, "because if I stay, Papa will be miserable. And how can I endure making him miserable? When he... Mr. Heathcliff, let me go home. I promised to marry Linton. Papa would like me to, and I love him. Why should you wish to force me to do what I'm willing to do myself?" "Let him dare to force you," I cried. "There's law in the land, thank God, there is. Though we were born in an out-of-the-way place, I'd inform, if he were my own son, that it's a felony without benefit of clergy." "Silence," said the ruffian. "To the devil with your clamour. I don't want you to speak, Miss Linton. I shall enjoy myself remarkably in thinking your father will be miserable. I shall not sleep for satisfaction. You could have hit on no surer way of fixing your residence under my roof for the next 24 hours, that informing me that such an event would follow. As to your promise to marry Linton, I'll take care you shall keep it, for you shall not quit this place till it is fulfilled." "Send Ellen, then, to let Papa know I'm safe," exclaimed Catherine, weeping bitterly. "Oh, marry me now! Poor Papa! Ellen! He'll think we're lost. What shall we do?" "Not he. He'll think you are tired of waiting on him, and run off for a little amusement," answered Heathcliff. "You cannot deny that you entered my house of your own accord, in contempt of his injunctions to the contrary, and it is quite natural that you should desire amusement at your age, and that you would weary of nursing a sick man, and that man only your father. Catherine, his happiest days were over when your days began. He cursed you, I dare say, for coming into the world. I did at least. And it would just do if he cursed you as he went out of it. I'd join him. I don't love you. How should I? Weep away. As far as I can see, it will be your chief diversion hereafter, unless Linton makes amends for other losses, and your provident parents appears to fancy he may. His letters of advice and consolation entertained me vastly, and his last, he recommended my jewel to be careful of his, and kind to her when he got her. Careful and kind, that's parental. But Linton requires his whole stock of care and kindness for himself. Linton can play the little tyrant well. He'll undertake to torture any number of cats, if their teeth be drawn and their claws be pared. You'll be able to tell his uncle fine tales of his kindness when you get home again, I assure you. Remember when Kathy was so excited to meet Heathcliff? Yeah, we do. I was gonna say remember when we were happy, but there's no such thing as happiness in this book. This is all misery. Oh, the misery! Everybody, Heathcliff wants everyone to be his enemy. You're right there, I said. Explain your son's character. Show his resemblance to yourself, and then, I hope, Miss Cathy will think twice before she takes the cockatrice. I don't much mind speaking of his amiable qualities now, he answered, because she must either accept him or remain a prisoner, and you along with her till your master dies. I can detain you both, quite concealed here. If you doubt, encourage her to retract her word, and you'll have an opportunity of judging. I will not retract my word, said Catherine. I'll marry him within this hour, if I may go to Thrushcross Grange afterwards. Mr. Heathcliff, you're a cruel man, but you're not a fiend, and you won't, from mere malice, destroy irrevocably my happiness. If Papa thought I had left him on purpose, and if he died before I returned, could I bear to live? I'm given over crying. I'm going to kneel here, at your knee, and I'll not get up, and I'll not take my eyes from your face till you look back at me. No, don't turn away, do look. You'll see nothing to provoke you. I don't hate you. I'm not angry that you struck me. Have you never loved anybody in your life, Uncle? Never! You must look once. I'm so wretched. You can't help being sorry and pitying me. Keep your F's fingers off me and move, or I'll kick you, cried Heathcliff, brutally repulsing her. I'd rather be hugged by a snake. How the devil can you dream of fawning over me? I detest you. He shrugged his shoulders, shook himself indeed, as if his flesh crept with aversion, and thrust back his chair, while I got up and opened my mouth to commence a downright torrent of abuse. But I was rendered dumb in the middle of the first sentence by a threat that I should be shown into a room by myself. The very next syllable I uttered. It was growing dark. We heard the sound of voices at the garden gate. Our host hurried out instantly. He had his wits about him. We had not. There was talk of 2 or 3 minutes he had returned alone. He did love someone, yeah. And it was a very twisted love on both sides. And that is why he is twisted now. I thought it had been your cousin Hareton, I observed to Catherine. I wished he would arrive. Who knows but he might take our part? It was 3 servants sent to seek you from the Grange, said Heathcliff, overhearing me. You should have opened a lattice and called out, but I could swear that Chit is glad you didn't. She's glad to be obliged to stay, I'm certain. At learning the chance we had missed I guess you're dumbfounded. This is a confusing situation. You're not going to be ready for everything. We both gave vent to our grief without control, and he allowed us to wail on till 9 o'clock. Then he bid us go upstairs, through the kitchen to Zilla's chamber, where I whispered my companion to obey. Perhaps we might contrive to get out through the window there, or into the garret and out by the skylight. The window, however, was narrow, like those below, and the garret trap was safe from our attempts, for we were fastened in as before. We neither of us lay down. Catherine took her station by the lattice and watched anxiously for morning, and a deep sigh being the only answer I could obtain to my frequent entreaties that she would try to rest. I seated myself in a chair and rocked to and fro, passing harsh judgment on my many derelictions of duty, from which, it struck me then, all the misfortunes of my employers sprang. It was not the case in reality, I am aware, but it was, in my imagination, that dismal night. And I thought Heathcliff himself less guilty than I. Oh, Nelly, you did everything you could. There is very little Nelly could have done differently that would have changed things. At 7 o'clock he came and inquired if Mrs. Linton had risen. She ran to the door immediately and answered, "Yes!" "Here, then," he said, opening it and pulling her out. I rose to follow, but he turned the lock again. "I demanded my release. Be patient," he replied. "I'll send up your breakfast in a while." I thumped on the panels and rattled the latch angrily, and Catherine asked why I was still shut up. He answered I must try to endure it another hour, and they went away. I endured it 2 or 3 hours at length. I heard footsteps, not Heathcliff's. "I've brought you something to eat," said a voice. Opened the door. Complying eagerly, I beheld Hareton, laden with food enough to last me all day. "Take it," he added, thrusting the tray into my hands. "Stay 1 minute," I began. "Nay," cried he, and retired regardless of any prayers I could pour forth to detain him. And there I remained, enclosed the whole day, and the whole of the next night, and another, and another. 5 nights and 4 days I remained, altogether seeing nobody but Hareton once every morning, and he was a model of a jailer, surly and dumb and deaf to every attempt at moving his sense of justice or compassion. Nelly! Heathcliff, what the fuck? You just... Oh, what is going on? This is awful. He just kept her prisoner for like nearly a week. This book is stressful. Nelly! Nelly. It's no wonder she's so willing to spill the beans. Like, this is the shit I had to go through. Seriously, sir. I'm happy to sit here and do no work and just tell you about this because Heathcliff deserves every secret be told. On the 5th morning, or rather afternoon, a different step approached, lighter and shorter, and this time the person entered the room. It was Zillah, donned in her scarlet shawl, with a black silk bonnet on her head, and a willow basket strung to her arm. "Eh? Dear Mrs. Ellen," she exclaimed. "Well, there is talk about you at Gimmerton. I never thought you were snuck in the Black Horse Marsh, and Missy with you, till Master told me you'd been found, and he'd lodged you here. What? And you must have got on an island, sure. And how long were you in the hole? Did Master save you, Mrs. Dean? But you're not so thin. You've not been so poorly, have you?" Jesus. So he hasn't told anyone. It's nice how Heathcliff finds new and innovative ways to inspire disgust every chapter. He does! To think he kind of started off as the victim because of the bullying he had. It's always the quiet ones. "Your master is a true scoundrel," I replied, "but he shall answer for it. He needn't have raised that tale. It shall be laid bare." "What do you mean?" asked Zillah. "It's not his tale. They tell that in the village, about your being lost in the marsh. And I calls to Earnshaw when I come in. That's queer things, Mr. Hareton, happened since I went off. It's a sad pity that likely young lass can't Nelly Dean." He stared. I thought he had not heard aught, so I told him the rumour. The master listened, and he just smiled to himself and said, "If they have been in the marsh, they are out now, Zillah. Nelly Dean is lodged at this minute in your room. You can tell her to flit when you go up. Here is the key. The bog water got to her head, and she would have run home frightfully, but I fixed her till she came round to her senses. You can go bid her to the Grange at once, if she be able, and carry a message from me, that her young lady will follow in time to attend the squire's funeral." "Mr. Edgar is not dead," I gasped. "Oh, Zillah, Zillah!" No, sit down, my good mistress," she replied. "You're right sickly yet. He's not dead. Dr. Kenneth thinks he may last another day. I met him on the road and asked." Instead of sitting down, I snatched my outdoor things and hastened below, for the way was free. On entering the house, I looked about for someone to give information of Catherine. The place was filled with sunshine, and the door stood wide open, but nobody seemed at hand. As I hesitated whether to go off at once or return and seek my mistress, a slight cough drew my attention to the hearth. Linton lay on the settle, sole tenant sucking a stick of sugar candy, and pursuing my movements with his eyes. "Where is Miss Catherine?" I demanded sternly, supposing I could frighten him into giving intelligence by catching him thus alone. He sucked like an innocent. "Is she gone?" I said. "No," he replied. "She's upstairs. She's not to go. We won't let her." "You won't let her, you little idiot!" I exclaimed. "Direct me to her room immediately, or I'll make you sing out sharply." "Papa would make you sing out if you attempted to get there," he answered. "He says I'm not to be soft with Catherine. She's my wife, and it's shameful that she should wish to leave me. He says she hates me and wants me to die, but she may have my money. But she shan't have it, and she shan't go home. She never shall. She may cry and be sick as much as she pleases." He resumed his former occupation, closing his lids as if it meant to drop asleep. "Master Heathcliff," I resumed, "have you forgotten all Catherine's kindness to you the last winter, when you affirmed you loved her, and when she brought you books and sung you songs, and came many a time through wind and snow to see you? She wept to miss one evening because you would be disappointed, and you felt then that she was 100 times too good for you, and now you believe the lies your father tells you, though you know he detests you both, and you join him against her. That's fine gratitude, is it not?" The corner of Linton's mouth fell, and he took the sugar candy from his lips. "Did she come to Wuthering Heights because she hated you?" I continued. "Think for yourself! As to your money, she does not even know that you have any. And you say she's sick, and yet you leave her alone up there in a strange house, you, who have felt what it is to be so neglected. You could pity your own sufferings, and she pitied them too, but you won't pity hers. I shed tears, Master Heathcliff, you see, an elderly woman, and a servant merely, and you, after pretending such affection, and having reason to worship her almost, store every tear you have for yourself, and lie there quite at ease. Ugh! You're such a heartless, selfish boy." "I can't stay with her," he answered crossly. "I'll not stay by myself. She cries so I can't bear it. She won't give over, though I say I'll call my father. I did call him once, and he threatened to strangle her if she was not quiet. But she began again the instant he left the room, moaning and grieving all night long, though I screamed for vexation that I couldn't sleep." "Is Mr. Heathcliff out?" I inquired, perceiving that the wretched creature had no power to sympathize with his cousin's mental tortures. "He's in the court," he replied, "talking to Dr. Kenneth, who says uncle is dying truly at last. I'm glad, for I shall be the master of the Grange after him. Catherine always spoke of it as her house. It isn't hers, it's mine. Papa says everything she has is mine. All her nice books are mine. She offered to give me them, and her pretty birds, and her pony Minnie, if I would get the key of our room and let her out, but I told her she had nothing to give. They were all mine. And then she cried, and took a little picture from her neck, and said I should have that, 2 pictures in a gold case, on one side her mother, on the other uncle, when they were young. That was yesterday. I said they were mine too, and tried to get them from her. The spiteful thing wouldn't let me. She pushed me off and hurt me. I shrieked out. That frightens her. She heard Papa coming, and she broke the hinges and divided the case, and gave me her mother's portrait, and the other she attempted to hide. But Papa asked me what was the matter, and I explained it. He took the one I had away, and ordered her to resign hers to me. She refused, and he struck her down, and wrenched it off the chain, and crushed it with his foot. And you were pleased to see her struck? I asked, having my designs in encouraging his talk. I winked, he answered. I wink to see my father strike a dog or a horse. He does it so hard. Yet I was glad at first. She deserved punishing for pushing me. But when Papa was gone, she made me come to the window and showed me her cheek, cut on the inside against her teeth, and her mouth filling with blood. And then she gathered up the bits of the picture and went and sat down with her face to the wall. And she has never spoken to me since. And I sometimes think she can't speak for pain. I don't like to think so, but she's a naughty thing for crying continually. And she looks so pale and wild, I'm afraid of her. And you can get the key if I choose, I said. Yes, when I'm upstairs, he answered. But I can't walk upstairs now. Oh, you little shit, you think you have a choice. That's adorable. In what apartment is it? I asked. Oh, he cried, I shan't tell you where it is. It is our secret. Nobody hither, Hareton, nor Zilla it is to know. There, you've tried me. Go away, go away. As he turned face on to his arm and shut his eyes again, I considered it best to depart without seeing Mr. Heathcliff, and began and bring rescue for my young lady from the Grange. On reaching it, the astonishment of my fellow servants to see me, and their joy also was intense, and when they heard that their little mistress was safe, 2 or 3 were about to hurry up and shout the news at Mr. Edgar's door. But I bespoke the announcement of it myself. How changed I found him even in those few days. He lay an image of sadness and resignation awaiting his death. Very young he looked, though his actual age was 39. God, he's younger than me. One would have called him 10 years younger at least. He thought of Catherine, for he murmured her name. I touched his hand and spoke. Catherine is coming, dear master, I whispered. She is alive and well, and we will be here, I hope, tonight. I trembled at the first efforts of this intelligence. He half rose up, looked eagerly around the apartment, and then sank back in a swoon. As soon as he recovered, I related our compulsory visit and detention at the Heights. I said Heathcliff forced me to go in, which was not quite true, but was a little bit true. Just a little. Oh no, Linton has fallen down the stairs and broke all of his limbs, 3 ribs, and a fractured skull, and ruptured scene. Oh well. Yeah, Catherine should do that. Catherine really should do that. And then maybe try do that to Heathcliff too. Slowly but surely, almost everyone at Wuthering Heights falls down the stairs. They should really get those checked out. I uttered as little as possible against Linton, nor did I describe all his father's brutal conduct, my intentions being to add no bitterness, if I could help it, to his already overflowing cup. He divined that one of his enemy's purposes was to secure the personal property, as well as the estate, to his son, or rather himself. Yet why he did not wait till his decease was a puzzle to my master, because, ignorant how nearly he and his nephew would quit the world together. However, he felt that his will had been altered. Instead of leaving Catherine's fortune at her own disposal, He determined to put it in the hands of trustees for her use during life, and for her children, if she had any after her. By that means it could not fall to Mr. Heathcliff should Linton die. Having received his orders, I dispatched a man to fetch the attorney, and 4 more provided with serviceable weapons to demand my young lady of her gaoler. Both parties were delayed very late. The single servant returned first. He said Mr. Green, the lawyer, was out when he arrived at his house, and he had to wait 2 hours for his re-entrance. And then Mr. Green told him he had a little business in the village that must be done, but he would be at Thrushcross Grange before morning. The 4 men came back unaccompanied also. They brought word that Catherine was ill, and too ill to quit her room, and Heathcliff would not suffer them to see her. I scolded the stupid fellow as well for listening to that tale, which I would not carry to my master, resolving to take the whole bevy up to the Heights at daylight, and storm it literally unless the prisoner were quietly surrendered to us. Her father shall see her, I vowed, and vowed again if that devil be killed on his own door-stones in trying to prevent it. Happily I was spared the journey, and the trouble. I had gone downstairs at 3 o'clock to fetch a jug of water, and was passing through the hall with it in my hand, when a sharp knock at the front door made me jump. "Oh, is it Green? It is Green!" I said, recollecting myself. "Only Green?" I went on, intending to send somebody else to open it, but the knock was repeated, not loud, and still importunately. I put the jug on the banister and hastened to admit him myself. The harvest moon shone clear outside. It was not the attorney. My own sweet little mistress sprang on my neck, sobbing, "Ellen! Ellen! Is Papa alive?" "Yes," I cried. "Yes, my angel, he is. God be thanked you are safe with us again." She wanted to run, breathless as she was, upstairs to Mr. Linton's room, but I compelled her to sit down on a chair, made her a drink, and washed her pale face, chafing it to a faint colour with my apron. Then I said I must go first and tell of her arrival, imploring her to stay. She should be happy with young Heathcliff. Imploring her to say she should be happy with young Heathcliff. She stared, but soon comprehending why I counselled her to utter the falsehood, she assured me she would not complain. Bless her cotton socks. I couldn't abide to be present at their meeting. I stood outside the chamber door a quarter of an hour, and hardly ventured here near the bed then. All was composed, however. Catherine's despair was silent as her father's joy. She supported him calmly in appearance, and he fixed on her features his raised eyes that seemed dilating with ecstasy. He died blissfully, Mr. Lockwood. He died so. Kissing her cheek, he murmured, "I am going to her, and you, darling child, shall come to us," and never stirred or spoke again. Oh, those are some really nice last words, actually. I'm so glad she got to see him. So glad. But continued that rapt, radiant gaze till his pulse imperceptibly stopped and his soul departed. None could have noticed the exact minute of his death. It was so entirely without struggle. Whether Catherine had spent her tears, or whether the grief were too weighty to let them flow, she sat there dry-eyed till the sun rose. one of the 2 VTubers that say bless her cotton socks. That's interesting. You'd think it'd be another British VTuber, but bless her cotton socks. I guess it's American too. On the deep sea. Bless her cotton socks. I don't know. But she does need her cotton socks do indeed need blessing. She sat till noon, and would have remained brooding over that deathbed. "Hello, Boris, welcome!" And would have remained brooding over that deathbed, but I insisted on her coming away, and taking some repose. It was well I succeeded in removing her, for at dinner time appeared the lawyer, having called at Wuthering Heights to get his instructions how to behave. He had sold himself to Mr. Heathcliff. That was the cause of his delay in obeying his master's summons. Fortunately, no thought of worldly affairs crossed the latter's mind to disturb him after his daughter's arrival. He surely doesn't mean he's going to see Catherine. She's absolutely not up there. She absolutely would not be, you're right. She would be in the other direction. Mr. Green took upon himself to order everything and everybody about the place. He gave all the servants but me notice to quit. He would have carried his delegated authority to the point of insisting that Edgar Linton should not be buried beside his wife, but in the chapel with his family. There was the will, however, to hinder that, and my loud protestations against any infringement of its directions. The funeral was hurried over. Catherine, Mrs. Linton Heathcliff now, was suffered to stay at the Grange till her father's corpse had quitted it. She told me that her anguish had at last spurred Linton to incur the risk of liberating her. She heard the men I sent disputing at the door, and she gathered the sense of Heathcliff's answer. It drove her desperate. Linton, who had been conveyed up to the little parlour soon after I left, was terrified into fetching the key before his father reascended. He had the cunning to unlock and re-lock the door without shutting it, and when he shouted he had gone to bed. When he should have gone to bed, he begged to sleep with Hareton, and his petition was granted for once. Catherine stole out before break of day. She dared not try the doors lest the dogs should raise an alarm. She visited the empty chamber and examined their windows, and luckily lighting on her mother's, she got easily out of its lattice and on the ground by means of the fir tree close by. Her accomplice suffered for his share in the escape, notwithstanding his timid contrivances. Oh Lord, so we've basically caught up now. So we've got 20% of the book to see what we can do. To see what our actual main character's gonna do, question mark. The evening after the funeral, my young lady and I were seated in the library, now musing mournfully, one of us despairingly, on our loss, now venturing conjectures as to the gloomy future. We had just agreed the best destiny which could await Catherine would be permission to continue her residence at the Grange, at least during Linton's life. He would be allowed to join her there, and I to remain as housekeeper. That seemed rather too favourable an arrangement to be hoped for, and yet I did hope, and began to cheer up under the prospect of retaining my home and my employment, and above all my beloved young mistress, when a servant, one of the discarded ones, not yet departed, rushed hastily in and said, that devil Heathcliff was coming through the court. Should he fasten the door in his face? Yes! Yes, you should! If we had been mad enough to order that proceeding, we had not time. He made no ceremony of knocking or announcing his name. He was the master, and availed himself of the master's privilege to walk straight in, without saying a word. The sound of our informant's voice directed him to the library. He entered, and, motioning him out, shut the door. It was the same room into which he had been ushered as a guest 18 years before. The same moon shone through the window, and the same autumn landscape lay outside. We had not yet lighted a candle, but all the apartment was visible, even to the portraits on the wall. The splendid head of Mrs. Linton, and the grateful one of her husband. Heathcliff advanced to the hearth. Time had little altered his person either. There was the same man. his dark face rather shallower and more composed, his frame a stone or two heavier perhaps, and no other difference. Catherine had risen with an impulse to dash out when she saw him. "Stop," he said, arresting her by the arm. "No more runnings away." "Where would you go? I'm come to fetch you home, and I hope you'll be a dutiful daughter and not encourage my son to further disobedience. I was embarrassed how to punish him when I discovered his part in the business. He's such a cobweb. A pinch would annihilate him, but you'll see by his look that he has received his due. I brought him down one evening, the day before yesterday, and just set him in a chair and never touched him afterwards. I sent Hareton out, and we had the room to ourselves. In 2 hours I called Joseph to carry him up again, and since then my presence has not portent on his nerves as a ghost, and I fancy he sees me often, though I am not near. Hareton says he wakes and shrieks in the night by the hour together, and calls you to protect him from me, and whether you like your precious mate or not, you must come. He is your concern now. I yield all my interest in him to you." "Why not let Catherine continue here?" I pleaded, "and send Master Linton to her? As you hate both, you'll not miss them. They can only be a daily plague to your unnatural heart." "You can't keep Heathcliff out just by shutting the door in his face. He'll just eat through it." "He will. He will." "I'm seeking a tenant for the Grange," he answered, "and I want my children about me to be sure. Besides, that lass owes me her services for her bread. I'm not going to nurture her in luxury and idleness after Linton is gone. Make haste and get ready now, and don't oblige me to compel you." "I shall," said Catherine. "Linton is all I have to love in the world, and though you have done what you could to make him hateful to me, and me to him, you cannot make us hate each other, and I defy you to hurt him when I am by, and I defy you to frighten me." "You are a boastful champion," replied Heathcliff, "but I don't like you well enough to hurt him. You shall get the full benefit of the torment, as long as it lasts. It is not I who will make him hateful to you. It is his own sweet spirit. He's as bitter as gall at your desertion and its consequences. Don't expect thanks for his noble devotion. I heard him draw a pleasant picture to Zillah of what he would do if he were strong as I. The inclination is there, and his very weakness will sharpen his wit to find a substitute for strength." "I know he has a bad nature," said Catherine. "He's your son. But I'm glad I've a better to forgive it, and I know he loves me, and for that reason I love him. Mr. Heathcliff, you have nobody to love, and however miserable that makes us, we shall still have the revenge of thinking that your cruelty arises from your greater misery. You are miserable, are you not? Lonely like the devil, and envious like him. Nobody loves you, nobody will cry for you when you die. I wouldn't be you." Oh, Catherine! Sweetie, you're making my model glitch. Catherine spoke with a kind of dreamy triumph. She seemed to have made up her mind to enter into the spirit of her future family and draw pleasure from the griefs of her enemies. That's Catherine! "You shall be sorry to be yourself pleasantly," said her father-in-law. "If you stand there another minute, begone, witch, and get your things." She scornfully withdrew. In her absence, I began to beg for Zillah's place at the Heights, offering to resign mine to her, but he would suffer it on no account. Yeah, because he knows he can't deal with you, Nelly. You're like the worst thing Heathcliff's ever really done to Nelly was the locking up. I think Nellie's the one person he wouldn't physically hurt. Maybe if she was around enough. But Nellie, he's soft on Nellie. Compared to everyone else, he's soft on Nellie. That's why he doesn't want her around. But he would suffer it on no account. He bid me be silent, and then, for the first time, allowed himself a glance around the room, and a look at the pictures. Having studied Mrs. Linton's, he said, "I shall have that home, not because I need it, but..." He turned abruptly to the fire and continued, with what, for lack of better word, I must call it a smile. "I'll tell you what I did yesterday. I got the sexton, who was digging Linton's grave, to remove the earth off her coffin lid, and I opened it. I thought once I would have stayed there. When I saw her face again, it is hers yet. He had hard work to stir me, but he said it would change if the air blew on it. So I struck one side of the coffin loose and covered it up. Not Linton's side, damn him. I wish he'd been soldered in lead. And I bribed the sexton to pull it away when I'm laid there. And slide mine out too. I'll have it made so, and then by the time Linton gets to us, well, he'll know which is which." "You are very wicked, Mr. Heathcliff," I exclaimed. "Were you not ashamed to disturb the dead?" "I disturbed nobody, Nellie." I told Heathcliff to get lost, and he tried sneaking in by hiding in a big can of beans from the store. He replied, and I gave some ease to myself. "I shall be a great deal more comfortable now, and you'll have a better chance of keeping me underground when I get there." Disturbed her? No. She has disturbed me, night and day, through 18 years, incessantly, remorselessly, till yesternight. And yesternight I was tranquil. I dreamt I was sleeping the last sleep that sleeper with my heart stopped and my cheek frozen against hers. And if she had been dissolved into earth, or worse, what would you have dreamt then? I asked. Of dissolving with her, and being more happy still, he answered. Do you suppose I dread any change of that sort? I expected such transformation on raising the lid, but I'm better pleased that it should not commence till I share it. Besides, unless I had received a distinct impression of her passionless features, that strange feeling would hardly have been removed. It began oddly, you know. I was wild after she died, and eternally from dawn to dawn, praying her to return to me, her spirit. I have a strong faith in ghosts. I have a conviction that they can and do exist among us. The day she was buried, there came a fall of snow. In the evening I went to the churchyard. It blew bleak as winter. All round was solitary. I didn't fear that her fool of a husband would wander up the glen so late, and no one else had business to bring them here. Being alone and conscious 2 yards of loose earth was the sole barrier between us. I said to myself, I'll have her in my arms again. If she be cold, I'll think it this north wind that chills me, and if she be motionless, it is sleep. I got a spade from the tool house and began to delve with all my might. It scraped the coffin. I fell to work with my hands. The wood commenced cracking about the screws. I was on the point of obtaining my object, when it seemed that I heard a sigh from someone above, close at the edge of the grave and bending down. If I can only get this off, I muttered. I wish they may shovel the earth over both of us. If they had, we would have had a lot less issues in our life. Heathcliff, I've run out of living people to abuse. Time to dig up the dead. Heathcliff gonna learn necromancy at this rate. He really is. And I wrenched at it more desperately still. There was another sigh, close at my ear. I appeared to feel the warm breath of it displacing the sleet-laden wind. I knew no living thing in flesh and blood was by, but as certainly as you perceived the approach to some substantial body in the dark, though it cannot be discerned so certainly, I felt that Cathy was there, not under me, but on the earth. A sudden sense of relief flowed from my heart. Through every limb I relinquished my labour of agony, and turned consoled at once. Unspeakably consoled. Her presence was with me. It remained while I refilled the grave, and led me home. You may laugh, if you will, but I was sure I should see her there. I was sure she was with me, and I could not help talking to her. Having reached the heights, I rushed eagerly to the door. It was fastened, and I remembered that accursed Earnshaw and my wife opposed my entrance. I remember stopping to kick the breath out of him, and then hurrying upstairs to my room and hers. I looked round impatiently. I felt her by me. I could almost see her, and yet I could not. I ought to have sweat blood then, from the anguish of my yearning, from the fervour of my supplications, to have but one glimpse. I had not one. She showed herself, as she often was in life, a devil to me, and since then sometimes more and sometimes less. I've been the sort of that intolerable torture, infernal, keeping my nerves at such a stretch that if they had not resembled the catgut, they would long have relaxed to a feebleness of lintons. When I sat in the house with Hareton, it seemed that on going out I should meet her. When I walked on the moors, I should meet her coming in. When I went from home, I hastened to return. She must be somewhere at the heights. I was certain. And when I slept in her chamber, I was beaten out of that. I couldn't lie there. For a moment I closed my eyes. She was either outside the window, or sliding back the panels, or entering the room, or even resting her darling head on the same pillow as she did when a child. And I must open my lids to see. And so I opened and closed them 100 times a night, to be always disappointed. It racked me. I've often groaned aloud till that old rascal Joseph no doubt believed that my conscience was playing the fiend inside me. Now, since I've seen her, I'm pacified, a little. It was a strange way of killing, not by inches, but by factions of hair's breadths to beguile me with the spectre of a hope through 18 years. Guys, it's really romantic. He just really misses his wife. I get that with Fauna streams. It's okay, sapling, stay strong. She'll reincarnate somewhere, I know it. Oh, let's take a drink while I pause. Mr. Heathcliff paused and wiped his forehead. His hair clung to it with wet perspiration. His eyes were fixed on the red embers of the fire, his brows not contracted but raised next the temples, diminishing the grim aspect of his countenance, but imparting a peculiar look of trouble and a painful appearance of mental tension towards one absorbing subject. He only half addressed me, and I maintained silence. I didn't like to hear him talk. After a short period, he resumed his meditation on the picture. I took it down and leaned it against a sofa to contemplate it at better advantage. And while so occupied, Catherine entered, announcing that she was ready when her pony should be saddled. "Send that over tomorrow," said Heathcliff to me. Then turning to her, added, "You may do without your pony. It is a fine evening, and you'll need no ponies at Wuthering Heights. For what journeys you take, your own feet will serve you. Come along." "Goodbye, Ellen," whispered my dear little mistress, as she kissed me. Her lips felt like ice. "Come and see me, Ellen. Don't forget." "Take care you do no such thing." "Take care you do no such thing, Mrs. Dean," said her new father. "When I wish to speak to you, I'll come here. I want none of your prying at my house." He signed her to precede him, and casting back a look that cut my heart, she obeyed. I watched them from the window walk down the garden. Heathcliff fixed Catherine's arm under his, though she disputed the act at first, evidently, and with rapid strides he hurried her into the alley. Those trees concealed them. Everything's miserable, which we expected. That's exactly correct for this book. But that doesn't mean I like it, okay? It doesn't mean it's not sad. Boo. Boo. I have paid a visit to the Heights, but I have not seen her since she left. Joseph held the door in his hand when I called to ask after her, and wouldn't let me pass. He said Mrs. Linton was thraying, and the master was not in. Zillah has told me something of the way they go on, otherwise I should hardly know who was dead and who was living. She thinks Catherine haughtily and does not like her. I can guess by her talk. My young lady asked some aid of her when she first came, but Mr. Heathcliff told her to follow her own business and let his daughter-in-law look after herself, and Zillah willingly acquiesced, being a narrow-minded, selfish woman. Catherine evidenced a child's annoyance at this neglect, repaid it with contempt, and thus enlisted my informant among her enemies as securely as if she had done her some great wrong. I had a long talk with Zillah about 6 weeks ago, a little before you came, one day when we foregathered on the moor, and this was what she told me. "The first thing Mrs. Linton did," she said, "on her arrival at the Heights, was to run upstairs without even wishing good evening to me and Joseph. She shut herself into Linton's room and remained until morning. Then, while the master and Earnshaw were at breakfast, she entered the house and asked all in a quiver if the doctor might be sent for. Her cousin was very ill." "We know that," answered Heathcliff, "but his life is not worth a farthing, and I don't spend a farthing on him." "But I cannot tell how to do," she said. "If nobody will help me, he'll die." "Walk out of the room," cried the master, "and let me never hear a word more about him. None here care what becomes of him. If you do, act the nurse. If you do not, lock him up and leave him." Jesus Christ. "He has achieved everything he needs to. He is no longer relevant. He can die now." Running away from Joseph is understandable. Yes, running away from Joseph is in fact correct. The order in which of people you should run away from in this book: Heathcliff first, Joseph second. Then she began to bother me, and I said I had enough plague with the tiresome thing. We had our tasks, and hers was to wait on Linton. Mr. Heathcliff bid me leave that labour to her. How they managed together I can't tell. I fancy he fretted a great deal and moaned, hissling day and night, and she had precious little rest. One could guess by her white face and heavy eyes. She sometimes came into the kitchen all wilded like, and looked as if she would fain beg assistance, but I was going to disobey the master. I never dare disobey him, Mrs. Linton, Mrs. Dean, and though I thought it wrong that Kenneth should not be sent for, it was no concern of mine either to advise or complain, and I always refused to meddle. Once or twice, after we had gone to bed, I've happened to open my door again and seen her sit crying at the stairs top, and then I've shut myself in quick, for fear of being moved to intervene. I did pity her then, I'm sure. I still didn't wish to lose my place, you know? Honestly, I really don't blame Zilla. This poor woman she has to work in Wuthering Heights. She's got to keep her head down. That's the only way to survive. Heathcliff legit using the "you've outlived your usefulness." He legit is. Legit. At last, one night, she came boldly into my chamber and frightened me out of my wits by saying, "Tell Mr. Heathcliff that his son is dying. I'm sure he is. This time. Get up, instantly, and tell him." Having uttered this speech, she vanished again. I lay a quarter of an hour listening and trembling. Nothing stirred. The house was quiet. She's mistaken, I said to myself. He's got over it. I needn't disturb them. I began to doze, but my sleep was marred a second time by a sharp ringing of the bell. The only bell we have put up on purpose for Linton, and the master called me to see what was the matter. I informed him that he wouldn't have that noise repeated. I delivered Catherine's message. He cursed himself, and in a few minutes came out with a lighted candle and proceeded to their room. I followed. Mrs. Heathcliff was seated by the bedside, with her hands folded on her knees. Her father-in-law went up, held the light to Linton's face, and looked at him, and touched him. Afterwards, he turned to her. "Now, Catherine," he said, "how do you feel?" She was dumb. "How do you feel, Catherine?" he repeated. "He's safe, and I'm free," she answered. "I should feel well, but—" She continued, with a bitterness she couldn't conceal, "You have left me so long to struggle against death alone, and I feel, and see only death. I feel like death." And she looked like it too. I gave her a little wine. Hareton and Joseph, who had been wakened by the ringing and the sound of feet, and heard our talk from outside, now entered. Joseph was fain, I believe, of the lad's removal. Hareton seemed a thought bothered, though he was more taken up with the staring at Catherine than thinking of Linton. But the master bid him get off to bed again. We didn't want his help. He afterwards made Joseph move the body to his chamber, and told me to return to mine, and Mrs. Heathcliff remained by herself. Working at Wuthering Heights is its own OSHA violation. Yes! Hostile workplace. In the morning, he sent me to tell her she must come down to breakfast. She had undressed and appearing going to sleep, and she was ill, at which I hardly wondered. I informed Mr. Heathcliff, and he replied, "Well, let her be till after the funeral, and go up now and then to get her what is needful, and as soon as she seems better, tell me." Cathy stayed upstairs a fortnight, according to Zillah. who visited her twice a day, and would have been rather more friendly, but her attempts at increasing kindness were proudly and promptly repelled. Heathcliff went at once to show her Linton's will. He had bequeathed the whole of his and what had been her movable property to his father. The poor creature was threatened or coaxed into that act during her week's absence, when his uncle died. The lands being a minor, he could not meddle with. However, Mr. Heathcliff has claim and kept them in his wife's right, and his also. I could suppose legally, at any rate, Catherine, destitute of cash and friends, cannot disturb his possession. Nobody, said Zillah, ever approached her door, except that once, and nobody asked anything about her. The first occasion of her coming down into the house was on a Sunday afternoon. She had cried out, when I carried up her dinner, that she couldn't bear any longer being in the cold. I told her the master was going to Thrushcross Grange, and Earnshaw and I needn't hinder her from descending. So, as soon as she heard Heathcliff's horse trot off, she made her appearance, donned in black, and her yellow curls combed back behind her ears, as plain as a Quaker. She couldn't comb them out. Joseph and I generally go to the chapel on Sundays. The kirk, you know, has no minister now, explained Mrs. Dean, as they call the Methodist or Baptist's place. I can't say which it is at Gimmerton, a chapel. Joseph had gone, she continued, but I thought it proper to bide at home. Young folks are always the better for an elder's overlooking, and Hareton, with all his bashfulness, isn't a model of nice behaviour. I let him know that his cousin would very likely sit with us, and she had been always used to seeing the Sabbath respected, so he has as good leave his guns and bits of indoor work alone while she stayed. Oh, 1 second, need drink. He coloured up at the news and cast his eyes over his hands and clothes. The train oil and gunpowder were shoved out of sight in a minute. I saw he meant to give her his company, and I guessed by the way he wanted to be presentable, so, laughing, as I durst not laugh when the master is by, I offered to help him, and he would, and joked at his confusion. He grew sullen and began to swear. Oh, Hareton, you simple man. I'm never mad at Hareton either. He's just, well, just a victim like everyone else, but I don't feel like Hareton's ever been malicious. Ever. Now, Mrs. Dean, Zillah went on, seeing me not pleased by her manner, you happen to think your young lady too fine for Mr. Hareton? I happen you're right. But I own I should love well to bring her pride a peg lower. And what will all her learning and her daintiness do for her now? She's as poor as you or I. Poorer, I'll be bound. You're saving, and I'll be doing my little all that road. Hareton is a lovable dumbass the crew. He is, in fact, a himbo. Ye old himbo. Hareton allowed Zillah to give him her aid, and she flattered him into good humour, so when Catherine came, half forgetting her former insults, he tried to make himself agreeable by the housekeeper's standards. Mrs. walked in, she said, as chill as an icicle, and as high as a princess. I got up and offered her my seat in the armchair. No, she turned her nose up at my civility. Earnshaw rose too and bid her come settle, and sit close by the fire. He was sure she was starved. I've been starved a month and more, she answered, resting on the word as scornful as she could. And she got a chair for herself and placed it a distance from both of us. Having sat till she was warm, she began to look around and discover a number of books on the dresser. She was instantly upon her feet again, stretching to reach them, but they were too high up. Her cousin, after watching her endeavours a while, at last summoned courage to help her. She held her frock, and he filled it with the first that came to hand. That was a great advance for the lad. She didn't thank him still. He felt gratified that she had accepted his assistance, and ventured to stand behind as she examined them, and even to stoop at and point out what struck his fancy in certain old pictures which they contained. Nor was he daunted by the saucy style in which she jerked the page from his finger. He contented himself with going a bit farther back and looking at her instead of the book. She continued reading or seeking for something to read. His attention became, by degrees, quite centred in the study of her thick, silky curls. Her face he couldn't see, and she couldn't see him, and perhaps not quite awake to what he did, but attracted like a child to a candle. At last he proceeded from staring to touching. He put out his hand and stroked one curl as gently as if it were a bird. He might have struck a knife into her neck. She startled round in such a talking. "Get away this moment! How dare you touch me? Why are you stopping there?" She cried in a tone of disgust. "I can't endure it. I'll go upstairs again if you come near me." Mr. Hareton recoiled, looking as foolish as he could do. He sat down in the settle, very quiet, and she continued turning over her volumes another half hour. Finally Earnshaw crossed over and whispered to me, "Will you ask her to read to us, Zillah? I'm stalled of doing naught, and I do like to hear her. Don't say I wanted it, but ask of yourself." "Mr. Hareton wishes you would read to us, ma'am," I said immediately. "Fuck you, Zillah! He asked if you could ask and not mention— oh, he just wanted a little help, Zillah. Come on. Oh, sweet boy," I said immediately. "He'd take it very kind. He'd be much obliged." She frowned, looking up, answered, "Mr. Hareton and the whole set of you will be good enough to understand that I reject any pretense at kindness you have the hypocrisy to offer. I despise you, and will have nothing to say to any of you. When I would have given my life for one kind word, even to see one of your faces, you all kept off. But I won't complain to you. I'm driven down here by the cold, not either to amuse you or enjoy your society." "What could I have done?" began Earnshaw. "How was I to blame?" "Oh, you are an exception," answered Mrs. Heathcliff. "I never missed such a concern as you." "But I offered more than once and asked," he said, kindling up her pertness. "I asked Mr. Heathcliff to let me wait for you." "Be silent! I'll go outdoors or anywhere rather than have your disagreeable voice in my ear," said my lady. Hareton muttered she might go to hell for him, and unslinging his gun, restrained himself from his Sunday occupations no longer. He talked now freely enough, and she presently saw fit to retreat to her solitude. But the frost had set in, and in spite of her pride she was forced to condensed to our company more and more. Zillah the Kaiju. I mean, it's spelt the same. However, I took care there should be no further scorning at my good nature ever since. I've been as stiff as herself, and she has no lover or liker among us, and she does not deserve one, for let them say the least word to her, and she'll curl back without respect of anyone. She'll snap at the master himself, and as good as dares him to thrash her. And the more hurt she gets, the more venomous she grows. Heathcliff cannot. Heathcliff's making a monster, he doesn't realise it. At first, on hearing this account from Zillah, I determined to leave my situation at a cottage and get Catherine to come live with me. But Mr. Heathcliff would as soon permit that as he would have set up Hareton in an independent house, and I can see no remedy at present, unless she could marry again, and that scheme it does not come within my providence to arrange. Providence. I watched Nosferatu today, by the way. I'll probably do a short on it tomorrow when I make some tea. I think Heathcliff knows exactly what he's doing, and he's loving every second. Exactly. He hates people that are afraid of him, and she's not. Which means he says he despises her. But I think he likes her, actually. Providence. Thus ended Mrs. Dean's story. Finally! It was 86% of the book. Yeah. It was a little boring. It was boring at times. The cinematography was great. And acting was very good. Mm-hmm. That'll be the summary of what you get tomorrow. Anyway, thus ended Mrs. Dean's story. Notwithstanding the doctor's prophecy, I am rapidly recovering strength, and though it be only the second week in January, I propose getting out on horseback in a day or two and riding over to Wuthering Heights. Why would you ride over to Wuthering Heights? To inform my landlord that I shall spend the next 6 months in London. Okay, fair enough. I guess you have to do that. And if he likes, he may look for another tenant to take my place after October. I would not pass another winter here for much. Oh, another chapter. We have like 10 minutes. Hooray, now the protagonist can actually do stuff. Maybe. We had that moment where he said he liked Mrs. Heathcliff, so maybe he can save Kathy. Maybe. I think she's already too far gone, though. The curse of Wuthering Heights has taken a hold. Who knows? Yesterday was bright, calm, and frosty. I went to the Heights, as I proposed. My housekeeper entreated me to bear a little note from her to her young lady, and I did not refuse, for the worthy woman was not conscious of anything odd in her request. Let me just take a drink. The front door stood open, but the jealous gate was fastened. As my last visit, I knocked and invoked Earnshaw from among the garden bells. He unchained it, and I entered. The fellow is as handsome a rustic as need be seen. I took particular note of him this time, but then he does his best, apparently, to make the least of his advantages. You know how the Langoliers, the plane landed in the airport in the decaying dimension? Is that what we're in Wuthering Heights now? Yes, definitely. I asked if Mr. Heathcliff were home. He answered no, but he would be in at dinner time. It was 11 o'clock. And I announced my intention of going in and waiting for him, at which he immediately flung down his tools and accompanied me in the office of watchdog. not as a substitute for the host. I feel like the Langiers would vomit up Wuthering Heights when they came to eat. Yeah, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? We entered together. Catherine was there, making herself useful in preparing some vegetables for the approaching meal. She looked more sully and less spirited than when I'd first seen her. She hardly raised her eyes to notice me, and continued her employment with the same disregard to common forms of politeness as before, never returning my bow and good morning by the slightest acknowledgement. She does not seem so amiable, I thought, as Mrs. Dean would persuade me to believe. She's a beauty, it is true, but not an angel. Earnshaw surely bid her remove her things to the kitchen. Remove them yourself, she said, pushing them from her as soon as she had done, and retiring to a stool by the window, where she began to carve figurines of birds and bears out of the turnip parings in her lap. I approached her, pretending to desire a view from the garden, and, as I fancied, auditory dropped Mrs. Dean's note onto her knee, unnoticed by Hareton, but she asked aloud, "What is that?" and chucked it off. "Oh, a letter from your old acquaintance, the housekeeper at the Grange," I answered, annoyed at her exposing my kind deed, and fearful lest it should be imagined as a missive of my own. She would gladly have gathered it up at this information, but Hareton beat her. He seized it and put it in his waistcoat, saying Mr. Heathcliff should look at it first. Thereat Catherine silently turned her face from us, and very stealthily drew out her pocket handkerchief and applied it to her eyes, and her cousin, after struggling a while to keep down his softer feelings, pulled out the letter and flung it on the floor beside her. "Oh, Hareton, we knew you were a good boy." As ungraciously as he could, Catherine caught it and pursued it eagerly. Then she put a few questions to me concerning the inmates, rational and irrational, of her former home, and gazing towards the hills, murmured in soliloquy. "I should like to be riding Minnie down there. I should like to be climbing up there. Oh, I'm tired, I'm stalled, Hareton." And she leant her pretty head against the sill, with half a yawn and half a sigh, and lapsed into an aspect of abstract sadness, neither caring or knowing whether we remarked her. "Mrs. Heathcliff," I said, after sitting some time a minute, "you are not aware that I am an acquaintance of yours, so intimate that I think it strange you won't come to speak to me. My housekeeper never wearies of talking about and praising you, and she'll be greatly disappointed if I return with no news or from you, except that you received her letter and said nothing. Hello, musical magic light, welcome. And thank you for the follow, yay! She appears to wonder at this speech and asked, "Does Ellen like you?" "Yes, very well," I replies hesitatingly. "You must tell her," she continued, "that I would answer her letter, but I have no materials for writing, not even a book from which I might tear a leaf." "No books?" I exclaimed. "How do you contrive to live here without them? If I may take the liberty to inquire, though provided with a large library, I am frequently very dull at the Grange. Take my books away, and I should be desperate." "I was always reading when I had them," said Catherine, "but Mr. Heathcliff never reads, so he took it into his head to destroy my books. I have not had a glimpse of one for weeks. Only once I searched through Joseph's store of theology, to his great irritation, and once, Hareton, I came upon a secret stock in your room, some Latin and Greek, and some tales and poetry and old friends. I brought the last here, and you gathered them as a magpie gathers silver spoons. for the mere love of stealing. They are of no use to you, nor else you concealed them in the bad spirit, as you cannot enjoy them. Nobody else shall. Perhaps your envy counselled Mr. Heathcliff to rob me of my treasures, but I've most of them written on my brain and printed in my heart, and you cannot deprive me of those. Earnshaw blushed crimson when his cousin made this revelation of his private literary accumulations, and stammered an indignant denial of her accusations. Mr. Hareton is desirous of increasing his amount of knowledge, I said, coming to his rescue. He is not envious, but emulous of your attainments. He'll be a clever scholar in a few years. And he wants me to sink into a dunce meantime, answered Catherine. Yes, I hear him trying to spell and read to himself, and pretty blunders he makes. I wish you would repeat Chevy Chase as you did yesterday. It was extremely funny. I heard you. And I heard you turning over the dictionary to seek out the hard words, and then cursing because you couldn't read their explanations. The young man evidently thought too bad that he should be laughed at for his ignorance, and then laughed at for trying to remove it. I had a similar notion, and remembering Mrs. Dean's anecdote of his first attempt at enlightening the darkness in which he had been reared, I observed, "But, Mrs. Heathcliff, we have each had a commencement, and each stumbled and tottered on a threshold had our teachers scorned instead of aiding us. We should stumble and yet totter. We should stumble and totter yet." "Oh," she replied, "I don't wish to limit his acquirements. Still, he has no right to appropriate what is mine, and make it ridiculous to me with his vile mistakes and mispronunciations. Those books, both prose and verse, are consecrated to me by other associations, and I hate to have them debased and profaned in his mouth." Sounds like people who get angry at remakes. How dare they make a remake of this thing? Besides, of all he has selected my favourite pieces that I love the most to repeat, as if out of deliberate malice. Hareton's chest heaved in silence a minute. He laboured under a severe sense of mortification and wrath. Don't call out 13-year-old me like that. Yup, I will. Teenage normal-sized phantom, what you doing? How dare there be remakes of things? How long we got? We have a fair while in this chapter. Let's see if we can get through something of a good stopping point. Which it was no easy task to suppress. I rose, and from a gentlemanly idea of relieving his embarrassment, took up my station at the doorway, surveying the external prospect as I stood. He followed my example and left the room, but presently reappeared, bearing 6 volumes in his hands, which he threw into Catherine's lap, exclaiming, "Take them! I never want to hear or read or think of them again." "I won't have them now," she answered. "I shall connect them with you and hate them." She has become a little shit. Not that she wasn't already, really. Not sure it's his fault to make Superior's busy. Hasn't come out yet. She opened one that had obviously been often turned over, and read a portion in the drawling tone of a beginner, then laughed and threw it from her. "And listen," she continued, provokingly commencing a verse of an old ballad in the same fashion. But his self-love would endure no further torment. I heard, and not altogether disapprovingly, a manual check given to her saucy tongue. The little wretch had done her utmost to hurt her cousin's sensitive, though uncultivated feelings, and a physical argument was the only mode he had of balancing the account. and repaying his effects on the inflictor. He afterwards gathered the books and hurled them on the fire. I read in his countenance what anguish it was to offer that sacrifice to spleen. I fancied that as they consumed, he recalled the pleasure they had imparted, and the triumph for every increasing pleasure he had anticipated from them. And I guessed the incitement to his secret studies also. He had been content with daily labour and rough animal enjoyments till Catherine crossed his path. Shame at her scorn, and hope of her approval, were the first prompters to higher pursuits, and instead of guarding him from one and winning him to the other, his endeavours to raise himself had produced just the contrary result. Yes, that's all the good that such a brute as you can get from them, cried Catherine, sucking her damaged lip and watching the conflagration with indignant eyes. You'd better hold your tongue now, he answered fiercely, and his agitation precluded further speech. He advanced hastily to the entrance, where I made way for him to pass. But ere he had crossed the door stones, Mr. Heathcliff, upcoming the causeway, encountered him, and laying hold of his shoulder, asked, "What's to do now, my lad?" "Naught," he said, and broke away to enjoy his grief and anger in solitude. Heathcliff gazed after him and sighed. I think this is probably one of the best places I can stop for now. Maybe we can do a bit of highlighting here. Maybe we can just put a little highlighter there. So I know where to start next time, because we have loads of the chapter left. We've already run late, unfortunately. Thank you everyone for coming. Next week we will not be continuing Wuthering Heights. We're going to take a small break from Wuthering Heights for a good reason, I promise. This is the reason. So there's this author. He's been in the chat once or twice. His name is Trent, and he wrote a book called The Protector, and it was one of the very first books I ever got given to review for free. This was like before I started streaming, when I was trying to do a book blog kind of thing, and I really appreciated it. And recently he's rewritten that book, and he's released it 2 days ago as a brand new book. So we're going to read a preview of that book, The Protector, next week, to thank him for helping me get to where I am today, and thank him for the free version I got as well. So we'll be doing that. So we're just going to take one tiny weeny baby break from Wuthering Heights just to read that as a preview next week, and then we'll be back to Wuthering Heights the week after. Other than that, thank you everyone for coming to the stream. Thank you everyone in chat. Thank you to anyone who lurked. Thank you to anyone who watches the VOD. I really appreciate you coming and enjoying my content, no matter which way you do it. If you would like to, keep on track and keep up with me, best ways to do that, obviously, is to leave a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel. If you're on YouTube, and if you're on Twitch, give the channel a cheeky follow. Also join the Discord. I keep forgetting to say that one. But where will I get your weekly dose of suffering and abuse? I don't know. You'll have to find that somewhere else. I mean, there's always the D&D. That's gonna be struggling and abuse, probably suffering too. So that's tomorrow. Monday will be solo D&D day. We'll be back to the patron, the Warlock of Chat. So if you would like to come in and be part of my Warlock patron, then you guys will be able to help influence the story. what we're doing next stream is we're gonna be trying to infiltrate the church due to trying to find out more about this Umberly cult that tried to drown my town last session. So if you're interested in a little bit of D&D and you want to kind of help play along, then please come to the stream tomorrow. We'll also be starting a few new streams next week. Bellatrix didn't do quite as well this week, so I'll finally stop playing that. So I'm going to be making a clicker game because I wanted to get back to some game dev. So we're going to be using Game Maker to make a clicker game based off some of the story that I'm putting out on Patreon at the moment. And I'm also going to start I'm gonna commit. We're gonna start the Zero Escape games. The nonary games. I think that League? No, I will never play League. I will die before I play League. No League ever. I would maybe team fight tactics, but no. I still don't know how that works either, to be honest. I've watched my fiance play it, but I'm like, what is this? Valorant, definitely not. You will not be getting me to play FPSs, because I swear to you, you will think I'm cheat. You'll think that I'm trying to be bad when I'm playing them, because I'm actually that bad at FPSs. Did you know that Heathcliff is a top 50 league? I can. Oh my gosh! Heathcliff appeared in one of my anime recently. There's this anime that just came out. I think it's based off another app game called Contract of Wizard or something like that. And they're all literary boys again. We love our literary boys. Of Wizard. And one of the first boys that came up was called Heathcliff, and I was like, oh my god, Heathcliff! Why are you here? Why are you just like following me around? But it was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Heathcliff, so I think it was Heathcliff Jr. rather than Heathcliff Sr., which is still bad because he's still a little rude shit. We love our literary boys, except this guy. Heathcliff would be put off by how toxic the community is. No, Heathcliff would be the king of the toxic community because he is just he's a petty man. We hate him. We love to hate him. We love to hate this entire chaotic family. Except for Hareton and Nelly. I have nothing against Hareton. This poor boy. He's just so fucked up by his circumstances. How many guys have the name Heathcliff in anime? I don't know, but this one was definitely supposed to be a literary boy, because all the boys were based off Arcana and literary. I think Heathcliff was Star, and obviously Wuthering Heights. But they had like a Sherlock, and they had a Cain, which I guess was supposed to be a biblical reference, but you know, literary stuff. They had like a guy called Moors who was supposed to be like the cat that jumped over the moon kind of thing. It was interesting. It was very, very old school girl gets teleported to another world isekai, like old school shoujo isekai. Solomon Kane, yeah, I think so. Cain and Abel kind of thing. That's the only Cain we could think of. I went through the whole wiki after the first episode. I was like, who else is in this? I need to know. Anyway, I got distracted. I was saying goodbye. Yes, thank you everyone for coming. Subscribe, follow, that would be lovely. Thank you. If you would like to support me, I know a lot of you have been supporting me for over a year now! You absolute wild goobers that you support me so. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much! But if you would like to join those amazing wild goobers, and you would even like to get access to... Oh wait, no! I lied! We probably won't be starting nonary games next week because I need to do my Patreon stream next week. I forgot about that. Yeah, so it's Patreon stream next week, Patreon/membership stream. So if you want to get access to that, you will have to get a Patreon or membership at Bookworm tier or higher. And this week's will be we will be looking at, we'll read some SCP, like my favorite thing to do on Patreon streams, and goobers. I love goober as a thing. It just sounds so cute. You little goobers. Aren't you just cute goobers? Everyone's a goober. I'm a goober. You're a goober. We're all goobers. It's a lovely word. It just sounds good. No one can be mad at being called a goober. The goofiest of goobers, indubitably. Well, also, if you've been watching the last couple streams, you'll see that I've been testing out some like voice triggers and things like that. I also want to do some of that on the Patreon streams, so you guys can help me figure out some new triggers and commands that you guys might be able to do. So we'll have some fun with that. Other than that, so if you get YouTube membership, you can get emotes, those streams, a Discord channel, and merch discounts. There is the Patreon, where you also get short stories, and merch discounts and free books. You get a free game as well, technically, with both. I released a visual novel, and you get that free with both membership and Patreon, either or. There's the Kofi. If you like my emotes, you can commission me to draw them, and I also have some short story audiobooks on there. Last but not least is my merch store at www.brandnewwestbit.co.uk, where you can get ebooks, first edition copies of books that I've written, a very soft pillow, a notebook, but yes, you can get Little Red and the Baba Yaga for free. If you're already a member, I can see Native Gamer. If you want to redeem that, what you guys need to do as members is go onto the community tab. And if you scroll, if you go into the community tab, there should be a thing. It's very hard to put it in a specific place, but there should be a members only community post. You might have to scroll down. That should give you access to download it for free. Let's see if we can find it so I can tell you specifically. When did I release it? It was October, wasn't it? End of October, I said it would. Ahaha! Yeah, so you'd be looking for a post that was 2 months ago. It starts with, "Hi members, thank you so much for your continued support. Here's your link to your free copy of Little Red and the Baba Yaga." So if you didn't already know where to get that, that's where you get it as members. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much, Evan, for coming. I will be back tomorrow with D&D, but for now, I had fun. I hope you had fun. This has been Brand New Westbit Lantern Library. Goodbye. Bye.